podcast today, Bobby Clampett. Introduce Bobby here. He's got an amazing history. After many years of studying the greatest players in the world, Bobby Clampett founded Impact Zone Golf, where his goal is to enhance and accelerate the enjoyment and learning of the game of golf. Just exactly what Encore is focused on, having more fun playing golf. He enjoyed a spectacular amateur career and collegiate career, with many of his records still standing today. He turned pro at 20 after his junior year at BYU, played on the PGA Tour for 16 years, transitioned to a golf analyst and commentator in the 90s to 2010. He founded Impact Zone in 2008, a revolutionary system that concentrates on improving players' impact position rather than their style of swing, which is so very important. We're going to get into that. Again, mentioned PGA Tour player, won the 1982 Southern Open, 36 top 10 finishes in his career, over $1 million in career earnings. Bobby, welcome to the Encore podcast.
Great to be with you, Steve.
And for our listeners, you're calling in from, is it Monterey, California?
I am. Yeah, Carmel, California.
Carmel, nice.
Part-time, and when we're not in Naples, Florida, we're in Carmel, California. Two pretty nice places to live.
Not bad. And I understand you were born right near Pebble Beach, and is that kind of what got you exposed to the game of golf, that proximity to Pebble?
I don't get many sympathizers because I tell them that we had two home courses in high school, Spyglass Hill and Pebble Beach. So how could you not fall in love with the game of golf when you have an opportunity to play those courses on a daily basis?
Was your father a golfer? How'd you get introduced to it?
No, actually, it's interesting. I think it was something I was just meant to do. I can remember my first golf shot I ever saw hit was at the Olympic Club. I was 6 years old. We were walking the course. We used to live in San Francisco at that time. And I was so intrigued with watching how a golfer could swing, hit this ball, fly way up into this beautiful sky with these beautiful cypress trees and pine trees, and then they'd go hit it again, and they were trying to get it in this little hole. And I was so intrigued with all this. And I would say to my Mom, what game is this? This looks really cool. And she said, oh, that's the game of golf. I said, I want to learn to play. Yeah, sure. You want to learn to play everything. Yeah. And finally, 4 years later, we moved to Monterey, we had moved to Monterey, and then we moved to Carmel Valley, and my mom had connections with the owner of Quail Lodge, who was Ed Haber, and we couldn't afford to be members of the club, but I was willing to work just to learn how to play golf. And Mr. Haber gave me a job when I was 10, and Lee Martin started giving me lessons, and 6 months later, I entered my first junior tournament and went on from there.
So recognizing a pattern, obviously you've kind of taken the game to the next level from a playing standpoint. Very few of us have the talent to get onto the tour. And then also from a teaching standpoint, you've authored books, you've developed a methodology, you've got the master PGA credentials. So what kind of motivates you to kind of take things to the next level from a professional standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question, Steve. I think my motivation keeps increasing more and more the more I get into the world of teaching, which really I had nothing to do with for so long, right? I was a player first and foremost, and then I was a golf announcer. I did some golf course design work. I did a lot of outings. I did a lot of public speaking, but golf instruction was not something I was really that interested in. But I was really intrigued when CBS invented or developed the BizHub Swing Vision camera. I got really into studying golf swings. And it was the first time that you could really see the golf swing with such detail. And I would look at the likes of, a Jim Furyk and his swing, and then a Bubba Watson with his swing, and then Matt Kuchar. It looked like he hit his side on his backswing. It was so flat. And I was intrigued with some of the comments. Sergio was so laid off, Ernie Els was so laid off, and then all of a sudden Ernie Els got it on plane and his game went to crap. David Duval had this weird looking grip and swing, and he was #1 in the world and then changed his swing. And all these players were, Seve tried to change his swing and totally messed him up. All these great players that changed their swings. And then I'm watching some of the craziest, goofiest swings, and they're winning all the money. I mean, Furyks won over $100 million playing golf. And yet, when you go take a lesson, the first thing the guys wanted to do with me is, and they do with everybody, is they want to change your swing so that it looks like the swing they think you should have.
Right.
And I thought, is this really how the game should be taught? So it led me down this study with the use of this BizHub Swing Vision cameras to study players' swings and, most importantly, their impacts. And I would study not only from the aspect of the cameras, but my job at CBS Sports was an on-course reporter. So I would have the luxury of standing right next to Tiger Woods while he's practicing, watching when he's on the course. Phil Mickelson, Sergio, didn't matter who it was. I had the open door to go do anything I wanted with them. And so I developed relationships with all those guys, and I would study what they do. Then we'd go back and we'd watch their swings on the BizHub Swing Vision camera. And they had very different styles of swings. Some had weak grips, some had strong grips, some had short back swings, some had long back swings. Some loaded it early, some loaded it late. Some were upright, some were flat. Some were steep in the middle of their swing planes, others were laid off. Some their hands went out, some their hands went in. Some they bent their right knee on the backswing, some straightened it. Some had big hip turns, some had little hip turns, and on and on and on. Some were cupped at the top, some were flat, some were arched, right? So all these different swing styles, and every time you pick up a golf magazine or you go take a lesson, they're talking about, gosh, when Dustin Johnson hit the scene, everybody was like, "Oh, that's the secret to playing great golf. You got to have that arched wrist at the top of your backswing." Thank God Butch Harmon never tried to change that. Would have driven Dustin Johnson off the tour too. And so it led me down this study of what makes all these players so great. And one of the common factors is when they hit a ball, you can hear the compression of the ball. You can hear how solid the sound of the strike. So I knew that was part of the equation. Then I started to dig in a little deeper and watch the divots that they took. And then with the help of the BizHub cameras, I'd get our guys at CBS to really narrow in on what was actually happening in impact. And we would literally look and study what was going through the impact zone. And you could see with all these players, they were taking the lag that they had developed in their swing and they were using their body to pull it through and keeping the lag at the same time. So it was always a body controlled, bringing the lag through the ball so that there was no manipulation down at the bottom. And they all hit the ball in the downswing where they were compressing the ball. And I did a study of where their swing bottom or their deepest part of the divot was, and noticed that all of them had their deepest part of a divot about 4 inches in front of the ball. And it led me down this to study more about, well, what are the ingredients of good impact? And then how do they create it regardless of your style? And that's the genesis of impact-based teaching that we teach. And now we've trained literally over 200 instructors around the world. But we most importantly have now 5 levels of certification that our instructors who teach in our academies down in Southwest Florida have to go through all 5 levels and really learn the intricacies of how to prioritize people's swing flaws based on improving their impact. Because golf, whether you want to admit it or not, is entirely a game of impact. There's no room for what your swing looks like. It's all about the strike of the ball. And thank God Jim Furyk's dad, Mike, never changed Jim's swing either.
Yeah, so I feel like listeners, can be comfortable with this idea of everyone's got a different takeaway, and the impact is where the magic happens. But that wasn't always the case, and you were really one of the first to kind of pioneer this impact methodology years ago. Was there an aha moment? Was there something that really just struck a chord and you said, I'm onto something, that you can relay for listeners?
Yeah, well, one of the aha moments I had was watching Tiger at Memorial. And it was a day I was actually on the range with him the day before, and then I was on the course with him the next day. And one of the things, he had such a successful record at Memorial. I think he won it, 8 times or something ridiculous like that. And the way he was striking the golf ball was so pure. It looked like he never missed a shot. And the confidence that he had. And it was easy for him. We'd talk out there on the fairways. He was so relaxed. And so I'm watching, and for the first time, I really started to study his divots. And I remember meeting Hogan when I was 21. Mark O'Meara and I spent a whole afternoon with Ben Hogan. And of course, Hogan always said the secret's in the dirt. And many people took that to mean that you should practice a lot, which is true. And Hogan did practice a lot. But I really think what Hogan meant by that is study your divots. The secret's really in the divot that you take. You take good divots, you're going to be a good golfer. And I started studying Tiger's divots. And then I compared them to mine. And one of the things I came across was where the bottom of his swing arc was. And it was exactly 4 inches in front of the center of the ball, and mine was only 2. So I was retired from competition. I hadn't been playing much. And I really wasn't playing that well. And I had gone through, different instructors changing my swing and was a mess for many years. And I had decided I'm not going to listen to that anymore. I'm just going to work on my impact. So I decided one day to go out and start hitting some shots. And what would it take to get my swing bottom 2 inches further forward? And I came across this load, lag, and workhorse concept of my swing, of improving all 3. And I moved my swing bottom 4 inches to 4 inches in front and started compressing the ball more. I was hitting it straighter. I was hitting it farther. I was controlling my distances better. I could shape the ball at will. All of a sudden, I started playing some really good golf. And it wasn't long after that, I threw in my name for the U.S. Open because I was going to Pebble Beach, and I hadn't played in a couple of years. Not even recreationally, I wasn't even playing. And without even a practice round, I went to the local qualifier and got into a playoff, got an alternate position, went to the next level, got in. Didn't even get to hit a range ball. I was swinging underneath a tree when they called me to the first tee because I was an alternate. And I was 2 over after 3 holes, speaking of aha moments. Wondering, we're going to play 36 holes and wondering if I can break 80 any of my rounds. And all of a sudden, this thought came to me because I was hitting a ball thin, wasn't making good contact, and I had developed this line drill that I did. And I went over and did this line drill and noticed that my swing bottom wasn't far enough forward. So I increased my load at the top of the backswing. And all of a sudden, it created great divots with my line drill. Of course, I'm not using a ball, and this is completely legal in a tournament because you're not using a training aid. And I thought, well, okay, next hole, I'm going to use a little better load at the top of the swing. I hit this beautiful 4-iron, 12 feet from the hole, and sank the putt for birdie to get to 1 over. Next hole, I hit a beautiful drive, 3-wood and a wedge, 8 feet from the hole, made that for birdie. I went 11 under par the rest of the round.
Wow.
Qualified for the U.S. Open, and went to Pebble Beach, my home course, and was 4 under par after 10 holes and leading the U.S. Open. and 2 shots ahead of Tiger Woods, who was playing right behind me, and then he nipped me by 27 after that.
Well, still a great story. Um, and just what an awesome history you've had. Not only to interface with the top players, to be among them, to be one of them. I noticed you played over in the Italian Open a number of times. Obviously Scotland, Australia. Um, so just really cool to have you on the show. I've got a question here from a fellow instructor, Tim Frank. He ran the Western New York PGA, and he was familiar with your methodology. Um, Also teaches a similar impact, style. And he said, this may be a little technical, but he said you talk a lot about loading in the backswing, but it seems a lot of players struggle with rotation on the lead side, and they will stall out, and many early extend. What types of things do you work on with players to ensure all that load and lag can be released properly through impact?
Well, that's a loaded question for sure. Um, I love students I love teaching them how to load and lag, and then you got to deliver that load and lag.
Right.
It's like I make the parallel. It's like you can go to the grocery store. My wife likes to cook. She sends me to the grocery store with a list of great ingredients. I get them all in the shopping cart, and I get them loaded in the car. But just before I get home, I dump them all out on the side of the road. They're not going to do a bit of good on the side of the road unless I can get them to the kitchen where it counts. So the workhorse, or the ground forces that we use, is that delivery mechanism that gets all the goods through impact. And I've done a lot of work. I'm on the ambassador team with Swing Catalyst, and we have 2 motion pressure plates in our studios in Southwest Florida that I teach a lot with. And Scott Lynn with Swing Catalyst and I have done several teacher certification and programs together. And it's all about using and learning how to use ground forces, and learning how the footwork, I call it a push and post. Most golfers are what I call upper body centric, and when you're upper body centric, that's when you tend to have early extension issues that he's suggesting. And so it's learning how to be able to engage the speed of your golf swing from ground forces and not from the upper body. A lot of teachers have taught, and I think it's a big mistake, trying to teach people to swing their arms faster. You got to teach your body how to rotate harder, stronger, and faster, and let your arms follow suit. So you allow that increasing of ground forces to create the extra club head speed. But most people have their sequences all backwards, and they learn to get the swing bottom. They learn to get swing bottom forward by moving the upper body forward like that, and that gets them over the top, gets them steep, and then they get out of sequence so that they get to this position too early. Then they have to back up, and that's when you start seeing a lot of early extension. And then when they start backing up, lag gets thrown out. They can't sustain the lag, and their shot dispersions go all over the place. Their face to path variances are crazy. Their low point variances are crazy. Their path is all over the place. And that's why you got to get in the sequence. So really the issue is ground force sequence to solve early extension issues.
Great feedback there, and good answer to a very technical question there. Um, I've noticed a lot of our Encore customers, um, you know, dealing at some point in their golfing careers are dealing with injuries, dealing with mobility issues, flexibility issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it's frustrating because in some cases it's keeping them from golfing. A lot of us sit at a desk and work 8-10 hours just in bad posture, and then go out and play golf and are in a lot of pain. Are you seeing a lot of flexibility issues with your students, or is there things you're working on Is it yoga you're prescribing
You're
to?
just reminding me, Steve. In fact,
Yeah.
I'm going to start doing the podcast down here in
Yeah.
a yoga edition because,
Nice.
and the reason why they call it third world pose is because in third world countries, they don't have chairs. People work from this squatted position where
Wow.
you're in duck feet, heels on the ground, and it opens up your hips. I got my elbows here inside my knees, and I can actually push my knees out, opens my hips, draws my butt even lower to the ground. And I am stretching my hips here, and I can stay in this position for several minutes. And when you get up, you got to go up very slowly. Otherwise, you can get a little lightheaded. So you build
Okay.
into it, right? But when I do a lot of teaching with my students from this position, because I find I implement yoga into every aspect of my life. So throughout the day, I'm doing things, even if I don't have an actual yoga program that I go to or a class, I'm implementing it in daily lives. And I really credit my practice in yoga when I turned 50 and went on to the Champions Tour. I never was injured. I never missed one practice round, one pro-am round, or one tournament round. And I played 87 events on the Champions Tour over a 5-year period.
Wow. That's
And,
incredible.
and for a guy who hadn't competed in 15 years and whose body wasn't in that competitive arena, to take that body and suddenly go perform with it. If I hadn't increased and worked on my practice in yoga, I don't think I would have had the stamina and the ability, the flexibility. Because it's true, I'm 62 years old now, and I'm still pretty much as flexible as I've ever been. Just the fact that I can get down in this position and stay there for this long, right? I better get up before I get too lightheaded here.
Yeah, no, I've gotten away from my yoga practice and need to get back to it, but I think a lot of listeners might associate it with, you know, more female centric workout. But I think as a golfer, once you get into it, you start to recognize how transformational it can be for the golf swing. And so
So,
hopefully our listeners heed your
you know,
advice.
as a professional tour player, we're all very in tune to our bodies and how our bodies feel, how each part is working. And we can actually do things while we're sitting down and perform stretches and exercises that's working our bodies in a positive way. And the more you can be engaged with that, you're setting yourself up for success.
For listeners that want to check out your online website, it's impactzonegolf.com, correct?
Correct.
You've
Yeah.
got a digital uh, platform there for lessons. Could you maybe walk us through how an online session would work if that's
Well, we have different programs. We have two primary ways that students come to work with us initially. One is through our 2-day signature golf school, and I lead all of those. And they're all now at the Renaissance Club in Fort Myers, Florida, which is only about 7 minutes from the Southwest Florida Regional Airport, Fort Myers Airport.
nice?
So easy to get to, great location, great private country club. We have our academy building there and great resources. So that's about to start up. See, when is our first? Our first school is November 12th and 13th. So that's coming up pretty soon. Those are always the best ways. We're only doing about 7 schools a year now. So it's the best way to get into our program. We have 2 different price points. We have a $19.95 price point and a $27.95 price point. We've kept the prices as they are for the last 6 years in a row. Haven't bumped them at all. And
Great.
we the second price point adds 2 hours each day. It's a VIP package. and we do short game with the VIP package, and then we actually go on the course after on the second day. But students learn, they go through a full assessment, they go through a reassessment on day 2. I do clinics. They get a lot of one-on-one time with me and our other instructors, and they really learn about what is proper impact, and how they personally can have the most success in getting there. And a lot of our students who go to our schools elect to go into coaching plans with us. Most of my students, my personal students, are in annual coaching plans now, where most of them live out of town. So those that do live out of town, they usually come in 3 or 4 times a year for maybe 3 days and get some what we call heavy hitting sessions. We do time in the studio, time on the course, but in between, we actually do online lessons. And I give over 200 online lessons a year now with my students. And it's a great way. We use a couple different avenues of doing it. Some of my students actually have simulators in their house now, which really works well. But
Yep.
I fully understand that's not something everybody's going to be able to do. But you know, there's things like there's some of these new launch monitors, inexpensive launch monitors. You know, a couple of them that some of my students have, like this new Garmin G10. It's only $700, pretty good. Send me the data. I can study the data. They take their swings with a simple, you know, the cameras are so good on the cell phones now, right? And they put it right up into their training space that we've created for them. I'll do a swing review, then we'll do a Zoom. We can do screen share and start asking, they can ask questions. I can post drills or practice plans or things that I want them to do. And we stay in touch, and we tend to do this depending on the student. Some do online lessons twice a week. Some do online lessons once a month. So it's whatever it is, wherever the student is, both budget and their game and their goals related. We can do this in the training.
No, that's great. It's
Yeah.
nice that you've got a variety of options, and the school, the in-person schools sound really, really awesome. So definitely, if you're listening, we'll link that. We'll link that in the comment section below,
And
and check out Bobby
can't
Clampett's
come
site
to,
for.
yeah, and Steve, for those who can't come to any of our golf schools, which is always the best scenario, they can get a new student assessment with
Right.
me or one of my students, one of my instructors rather. Um, and we're running specials for right now. New student assessments are 90 minutes. They're $195, and that's a great avenue, low cost avenue to get an introduction to what we do, see the technology, see the instructors themselves, because they all have the same coaching plans.
Right.
And they're a lot less expensive than I am. So
What has been the biggest difference that you have seen in your students' playing ability through the impact zone training?
that's a great question. We um, almost every single one of my students that are engaged in an annual coaching plan reduce their handicap by 50% in the
Wow.
first year, actually every year. They
Wow.
keep continually getting better. And it's across the board. It's not just isolated one or two, because the system of impact-based teaching doesn't just work for some like style-based teaching does. It works for everybody. And it's the only objective and measurable way to track improvement, because we look through the 5 different aspects of impact, and we're able now, with all this great technology that we have, we're able to actually see, is it getting better? We can measure face and path variances now. We've never been able to do that. We can measure low point. We can measure where the ball is struck on the face and the consistencies of it. So all these kinds of things that we've never been able to do before, I can tell a student something, and we can actually measure and see if it's working or not. And I'll be honest, there are times when I'll get a student going down a certain path and they can't connect with that. So guess what we do? We shift gears and go a slightly different direction, because impact is what is directing the instruction. if the goal should always be to improve your impact. If you're not improving your impact, you're not getting better. And this was the argument I had about traditional golf instruction is it's all style based. It's all about positions and it's all subjective. I think you should do this. Well, it's a hit or miss proposition. But if your impact is improving, it's not hit or miss. It's absolute and it works 100% of the time.
This has been fascinating, and I can see your excitement and passion for technology, for transforming golfers' games through your methodology. And I know we could probably talk for hours here, but I think we did a good job of, introducing you and the impact zone methodology. So really appreciate you coming on here. And for our listeners, please check out impactzonegolf.com. And any parting thoughts, Bobby, for listeners here?
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Steve. And it's like you guys are really in tune to making the game better. So I appreciate everything that you guys do with that goal in mind. And that's what we're about. We want to make people enjoy the game more because everybody wins when people's games get better and they start shooting lower scores. Everybody's a winner. And we want to keep this game around for a long time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bobby. Really appreciate it. Till next time. Thank you.
Okay.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.